You walk into a gym on January 2nd, and it's packed. Every treadmill taken, a line for the squat rack, someone doing curls in the doorway because there's nowhere else to stand. Your first thought is probably that this business is thriving. More people working out, more people paying, more money coming in. That's the logical read. It's also almost exactly backwards. For the type of gym most people actually belong to, the low-cost, high-volume chain with the black and yellow signage and the free pizza on the first of the month, a crowded gym floor isn't a sign of success. It's closer to a sign of a mistake. Because the entire business, structurally and mathematically, depends on most of the people who pay for it never showing up at all. Understanding why reveals something that applies far beyond gyms. How do you build a business around a product people want more than they actually want?
Start with the two models, because there really are two completely different gyms hiding under one word. The first is the traditional full-service gym or boutique studio, something like a Serious Strength and Conditioning Club or a spin studio or Equinox. These charge anywhere from $100 to $300 plus a month. Their entire pitch depends on you actually showing up. The class is the product. The trainer's attention is the product. If members stop attending, the business has nothing to sell them, and they cancel almost immediately because there's no reason to keep paying for something you're not using and can clearly see you're not using. The second model is the one that dominates the market by sheer member count, the budget gym. Planet Fitness is the best-known example, but the category includes chains like Crunch's lower tiers and various regional operators. Monthly dues sit around $10 to $25. And critically, this model is not selling attendance. It's selling the idea of attendance, the version of yourself that intends to go 3 times a week, starting soon. That distinction is the entire business model, and almost nobody joining actually clocks it. Here's the number that makes the model make sense. Industry data compiled by fitness industry researchers and widely cited by analysts covering the budget gym sector consistently shows that a large share of members at low-cost gyms, commonly estimated around 80%, rarely or never use their membership in a given month. Some estimates for the most aggressively low-price chains push even higher. If that number sounds like a failure rate, you're still thinking like a fitness company. Think like a financial one instead. And that number is closer to a margin. A gym has a fixed physical capacity. A given location with a given set of equipment can comfortably hold maybe 300 to 500 people working out at any one time before it starts to feel unusable and members start complaining and leaving. If a budget gym only ever sold memberships up to that real usage capacity at $10 a month, the location would barely cover its lease. That math doesn't work.
But the gym isn't selling floor space. It's selling a monthly financial claim on floor space that the buyer is statistically unlikely to exercise. So instead of selling 500 memberships to fill a 500-person capacity, a single Planet Fitness location routinely sells anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 memberships, sometimes more, against that same physical footprint. The overwhelming majority of those members are, financially speaking, pure profit, with almost no associated cost. No extra water usage, no extra equipment wear, no extra staffing, because they simply aren't there. That's the first piece of the mechanism. The second piece is what makes it durable, rather than just a clever pricing trick, the real estate underneath it. Budget gym chains don't build glamorous flagship locations in expensive downtown cores. They deliberately target unglamorous, oversized retail space, former big box stores, defunct department stores, dead retail anchors and strip malls that have struggled to find tenants since the 2000s retail contraction. This isn't a coincidence or a budget constraint. It's a strategy with its own name in commercial real estate circles. These gyms are frequently used as what's called an anchor tenant, a large, reliable, long-lease occupant that a landlord needs to keep the rest of a shopping center viable, because anchor tenants draw the consistent daily foot traffic that smaller retailers depend on.
Because struggling retail landlords need these anchors badly, gym chains can negotiate lease rates well below what a typical retail tenant would pay for the same square footage, sometimes with additional landlord-funded build-out incentives on top. A vacant 20,000 square foot former Sports Authority or Toys R Us is worth very little to a landlord sitting empty. It's worth a great deal to a landlord who can point to it and tell every other prospective tenant in the plaza, we have a national gym chain locking in 10 years right next door, guaranteeing foot traffic. That leverage lowers the gym's biggest fixed cost, which matters enormously once you remember the gym is charging $10 a month and needs every fixed cost minimized to make the arithmetic work. So now there are two profit levers already stacked on top of each other. Membership sold far beyond real usage capacity, and rent negotiated far below what the space would normally command. Add a third, and you get to where the real money actually concentrates: franchising. Most people assume that when they pay their monthly gym fee, that money mostly goes to the gym they're standing in. For a franchised location, and the large majority of Planet Fitness locations, for example, are franchised rather than corporately owned, that's not quite how it flows. A franchisee, the local business owner who actually leases the building, buys the equipment, and hires the staff, pays the parent company for the right to use the brand. That typically includes an upfront franchise fee plus an ongoing royalty, commonly around 7% of monthly revenue for a chain like this, plus additional contributions to a national advertising fund, often another few percentage points on top. This is where the business model quietly changes shape entirely. The parent corporation is not, in any meaningful financial sense, in the business of getting people to work out. It's in the business of collecting a percentage of revenue from hundreds of independently owned locations, each of which is separately doing the work of oversubscribing members, negotiating cheap leases, and carrying the local risk. The corporation's earnings scale with the number of franchise locations and their aggregate revenue, largely independent of whether any specific member in any specific city ever does a single rep. That's why, when Planet Fitness went public in 2015, analysts covering the stock weren't primarily valuing it as a fitness company. They were valuing it closer to a royalty and real estate business, wearing gym clothes, a recurring revenue franchisor with a highly diversified, highly automated cash flow stream that happened to be denominated in monthly memberships instead of, say, licensing fees. Which brings us to the genuinely counterintuitive part, the piece that flips the entire common sense assumption about the industry upside down. In most subscription businesses, a company desperately wants engagement. Streaming services obsess over how much you watch because low engagement predicts cancellation, and cancellation is the enemy. You'd assume the same logic applies to gyms, that a gym chain would want to see you constantly because a member who never shows up seems like a member about to quit. But that's not how the low-cost gym model behaves in practice, and the industry's own marketing quietly gives this away. Planet Fitness built its entire brand identity, the judgment-free zone, the deliberate avoidance of intimidating free weight areas, the lunk alarm that goes off if someone grunts too loudly or drops a weight, around making the gym feel welcoming specifically to people who are not serious, habitual exercisers. That's not accidental inclusivity marketing. It's target market selection. The ideal customer for this business isn't someone training for a competition. It's someone motivated enough to sign up in January, guilty enough to keep paying through the summer, and busy enough with actual life that they rarely show up to create wear, congestion, or staffing costs. The financial term that best explains this is one used across the entire subscription economy: passive churn versus active churn, layered against acquisition cost. Because monthly dues are so low, and because the sign-up process is designed to be nearly frictionless, the cost of acquiring each member is small relative to the lifetime revenue collected. A member who signs up, attends twice, and then quietly keeps paying for 14 months before finally canceling has, from the company's perspective, been a highly profitable customer, arguably more profitable than a dedicated daily user who wears down equipment, requires more staff on the floor, and eventually needs the location to expand capacity to keep up with demand. This is the moment the mental model fully flips. In a traditional gym, attendance is the point. In the budget model, non-attendance, properly priced, is the profit. Now, none of this means the system is invincible, and this is where the chain reaction becomes visible, because it did break, briefly and dramatically, and watching it break is the clearest possible proof of how the machine actually runs.
In March 2020, gyms across the United States were forced to close their doors under pandemic public health orders. For a normal service business, a temporary shutdown is a serious but survivable disruption. You lose revenue for a period, then reopen. For a business whose profit model is built on members paying monthly fees for access they mostly don't use, a mandated closure created an immediate and much more dangerous problem. It eliminated the psychological cover for that pattern. As long as the gym was open, a member who hadn't gone in 3 months could still tell themselves they might go next week. The option existed. The guilt stayed manageable. The subscription stayed alive. Once the doors were legally locked, that fiction collapsed instantly. Members could no longer plausibly believe they were paying for access they simply weren't using by choice. They were paying for something that, for the moment, did not exist at all. Cancellation requests and membership freezes surged, and several major operators, including large regional Planet Fitness franchisee groups, faced sudden, serious cash flow strain because their entire fixed cost structure, leases, loan payments on equipment, franchise royalty obligations, had been built assuming a steady, low attrition base of largely inactive but paying members. Remove the paying while inactive assumption, and the math that looked so favorable during normal operations turns hostile very quickly.
This is the domino effect worth sitting with for a second, because it's the clearest illustration in the whole story of what the business actually is. The system didn't nearly break because too many people worked out. It nearly broke because the mechanism that relied on people not working out, while still believing they eventually would, got interrupted. What happened next is where the case study earns its place, because the industry's response wasn't to abandon the model, it was to reinforce it. Planet Fitness and comparable chains leaned harder into the low-friction, low-guilt, low-commitment positioning once locations reopened, using aggressive promotional pricing, free months, waived enrollment fees, deep introductory discounts, specifically to rebuild the base of low-engagement, low-cost-to-acquire members as quickly as possible. The strategic conclusion the industry drew from the pandemic wasn't, "We need members who actually attend to be resilient." It was closer to, "We need to rebuild volume," because volume, not attendance, is the thing that was actually generating our margin in the first place. By 2022 and into subsequent years, Planet Fitness's own reported membership figures and revenue had climbed back above pre-pandemic levels, driven primarily by rejoining member counts, rather than any structural change to how much any individual member used the facility. So what's the realistic range of outcomes if you're the one thinking about actually owning one of these, rather than just joining one? The best case scenario, and it is a real one that plenty of franchisees have achieved, looks like this. You secure a location in an underserved suburban market with cheap anchor tenant lease terms. Build membership well past your realistic attendance capacity within the first 18 to 24 months. Keep staffing lean because low attendance requires little supervision. And settle into a highly predictable, largely passive, royalty-paying cash flow business that can be scaled into additional locations using the same playbook. The realistic, more common outcome sits well below that. Franchise entry costs for a chain like this, build-out, equipment, initial franchise fees, commonly run into the low millions of dollars, depending on market and square footage. And the profitability curve depends heavily on hitting that oversubscription ratio in a specific local market that may already have 2 or 3 competing budget gyms doing the exact same thing within a few miles. Saturation is a real risk in this model, precisely because the strategy is so replicable. Once one operator proves a formula works in a metro area, competitors copy it, and the pool of low-commitment potential members in that specific zip code gets split multiple ways, compressing everyone's margins.
The failure case looks like the businesses that got the real estate arbitrage wrong, or entered a market already saturated with budget gym competition, or expanded during a period, like the pandemic, when the core assumption that people will keep paying for access they mostly don't use briefly stopped holding. In those cases, the same structural feature that generates outsized profit in good conditions, a huge base of inactive but paying customers, becomes the single largest liability the moment that base starts actively questioning what it's paying for. Which gets to the real answer, the one underneath the treadmills and the black and yellow signage and the free pizza on the first of the month.
A gym membership, in this model, was never really a fitness product in the way it's marketed. It's a recurring financial instrument, priced deliberately low enough to bypass the part of your brain that carefully weighs whether you'll use something, and built on a well-documented, well-measured gap between how often people intend to exercise and how often they actually do. The businesses that dominate this category aren't the ones that got best at making people fit. They're the ones that got best at pricing the distance between intention and behavior and collecting on that distance every single month, whether the treadmill ever turns on or not.